I'm Robin Sullivan of the Leather Elves, and I'm excited to be here. Hope you're all doing well. It's uh, it's not too warm here, but I know where Nick is, it's really warm, and it's warm where Chris is too. But um, that's to be expected. So I've got to do the reminders. If we're a little out of practice, you can like us on Facebook, follow us on Facebook. You'll get notification when we go live, which is usually every other Friday night. You can follow us on or subscribe on YouTube, and you can also follow us on Instagram. So lots of different ways to watch and stay in touch with the Leather Elves and find out what's going on as far as sales and what the upcoming um, live streams are going to be about. But tonight, I reached out to a friend because I wanted to talk about. We haven't done any real training type live streams in a while. We've been talking about conservation and different projects, but I reached out to Chris Armstrong from Percy Wings Aviary. Hey, Chris.
Hi, Robin. Hi, everybody.
Um, the reason I reached out to Chris is because Chris is a wonderful um, free flyer, and a huge part of doing free flight is having a good recall train. So I titled tonight's live stream, It's Not Just for Flyers Anymore, but I think Nick has a picture of a video of some flight that Chris does with his amazing friends at Percy Wings. Do we have that, Nick? They're so beautiful. Now, who is that, Chris?
That is the Mighty Pie flying with Carly.
And Pi is like the wing person or wing bird for other birds, am I right?
Yeah, she's our little ringleader. She's one of my oldest free flyers. Well, not old, but experienced. She's been around. She's flown everywhere from here to Seattle Parrot Expo.
Yeah.
Lots of Moab, years of Moab time. She's uh, she's proved a big asset
Good
and help to me
boy.
and help training
Nice
birds.
job. Excellent.
Nice. All right. So recall training, Chris. Um, if you could say what the most important thing about recall training is, what would you say?
Relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. And now relationship with you as a trainer, relationship with flock mates. What are we talking about?
Relationship with me as a trainer. If I want an animal to come to me, they are more likely to come when I ask them if I have a relationship with them. So I actually start out with relationship building.
Oh, and you start at this point. So we were gonna, show you guys these. These are how old, Chris? Well, in this picture.
In this picture, they're probably about let me see the pin feathers. They're probably almost 3 weeks old, 2.5 weeks.
And then we have the next stage.
Oh yeah, they're just a few days old, 4 or 5 days old tops.
Yeah. And then the next thing that happens is this, right? This is where
They
we
grow
go.
up. It doesn't take them long either to get that big.
So it's that relationship building that goes on all along, and clearly these guys respond to you. You can see it in their behavior. Getting that, and the behavior is it's baby behavior, but that relationship, and it's a give and take thing too. I think when you're asking an animal, any kind of animal, to recall to you, they need to trust you. I mean, that's critical, don't you think?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about indoor versus outdoor. We've got so the reason I said it's for everybody is because I really think it's important and give me, well, I want you to weigh in on this too. I really think it's important that all birds in human care, all companion birds or birds in shows, whatever that case may be, I firmly believe they should all be recall trained. What do you think?
I agree. I think that should be a basic foundation. And one of the first things we kind of teach our children, right? Come here. Here, come to daddy. Walk, take your first steps to daddy. We want that relationship to help encourage, that recall to us at the youngest age possible. But even then, you can still build that recall even when they get older. It's not anything that has to be done when they're young.
Well, and that's something Chris and I talked about too, you guys at home. Chris and I, when we were talking about doing this, I said to him, "What do you think? Training older birds." I definitely think it's possible. That you can't. I have had people say, "Oh, well, I got this bird. It's a rehome, a rescue, whatever we're going to call it. It's 30 years old. I can't teach it anything. It can't teach an old dog new tricks." I disagree with that. What do you think, Chris?
I also disagree with that, but
Mhm.
I also question the expectations that they're wanting to do with that. If they're expecting to take that 30-year-old rescue they just got and want to take them out in free flight, then that's but if your expectation is to get some basic recall with him, just in the house, and then if just by chance he happens to get out the front door, you can say, "Yay, come on back this way," and you can get him back.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's the key right there is that, if you taking that 30-year-old rehome and starting him out as a flyer, there's a lot of work involved when you start out with a baby as a flyer. With a 30-year-old, probably not advised. But you assess it bird by bird, situation by situation, and just know that we, in anything we're going to do with our birds, there's going to be a significant amount of work involved, whether it's play, whether it's training, whatever that may be. There's a lot of work involved. So indoor recall, I think, that's where we start. So you don't correct me if I'm wrong, but you don't take your guys outside and then train recall, right?
No.
No. Okay. So we're going to start indoors. What does that look like at Percy Wings? You've got this baby or this young bird. How do you start? What are you going to do?
Even if it's an older bird, no matter what the age is, I like just to set them down on the counter and just stand a few feet away and coax them, bribe them, encourage them to come to me and start evaluating their behavior and reinforcing the behavior that I see that I like.
Hmm. Absolutely. I
A
think,
walking
and
recall. I
yeah.
wanted to say that a walking recall is equally important. I can't tell you how many birds that we've recovered trees that would not because of lack of confidence or whatever, but when we were able to target them down lower to low and have them climb, that walking is equally effective.
Yeah, I think, and you mentioned you can target them. To me, the target behavior, and we'll see some here, the target behavior is the base that you start everything with. Because once they're familiar with the target and what you're asking for,
Still finishing that. Good job.
and they start to
Right.
pair the behavior with the reinforcer, now you've got something there you go. You've got something that you can build on. And so for anybody that is thinking about training a recall, I think take those couple of steps back and go back to target training, go back to basics and do a basic, move the target, move the target, move the target. And then instead of doing, kind of a side to side like you were doing on that perch, do a, come make a hop, make this little hop to me. And, you know, I remember I was in Germany at a facility, and they were working on training a new bird that came in, and it was going to be a flyer eventually. And I remember them asking, they had this huge auditorium indoor, and they were asking this bird that just came in to come from the back of the auditorium all the way up to the front. And it was, I kind of stood there and watched for a little bit. And the bird was like, that's not happening. I have no idea what's going on in the middle of that room. You know, it might as well be a canyon filled with predators. I have no idea. And so we talked about maybe do one row, you know, like picture a movie theater, one row. Yes, you made it from this row to this row, one step at a time. And then you build, and then maybe you ask for two rows. I mean, what do you think, Chris? I think it's incremental like that. The approximations are tiny.
Small, achievable approximations that allow the bird to be successful. When you break those behaviors down into smaller pieces and work and reinforce the behavior that way, you know, behavior changes over time for various reasons. And when you train behavior like that, if it starts to break down, if you've trained it in pieces, you can actually evaluate where the behavior is broken down and refix that little piece and then reinsert it back in.
Yeah. And
like
I think
flying all the way across the gym, right?
Yeah, right. And I think people get frustrated when you find that breakdown in behavior, and, you know, working with people. And I don't know, you know, if people who are listening or watching have hit that, it's either a plateau when you're like, I can't get any further. And so you have to assess, are you asking for something? Are you asking for something that's too big a leap to the next step? Are you not reinforcing adequately for asking for the next approximation, that next step? Is it, you know, because it's kind of a value thing, you know, when you think about, is it worth it? Is it worth the
Right.
expenditure of energy to come from the back to the front versus a couple of rows? You know, and I'm sure you find this with your guys. I mean, flying is inherently reinforcing, you know, or innately reinforcing. But when you ask them to take that next step, how do you decide what you want to do as far as reinforcement is concerned?
Well, I'm heavy into antecedent arrangement to make it so easy for them and easy for me too. And yeah, that's how I work with that. If I see any behaviors breaking down, I just change the antecedents. And sometimes we just don't know. We just have to try it. I don't know. Depends. But if we keep doing the same old thing and expecting the bird to be different, I find that doesn't work.
Yeah. No. So just for people who are listening, Chris, who maybe don't know the technical term, can you explain in your words antecedent arrangement? Because it's so important that folks understand that.
Yeah, that's looking at the environment that you want the behavior performed in, and evaluating the bird in the environment to see best probable outcome. If the lighting in the room or the sounds, or a larger room versus a smaller room. Like when I'm doing tracker training and stuff, and sometimes in a smaller area, larger room, give them a less chance to present escape avoidance behavior, then they're more likely to let me be a little more tactile. So that's just setting up my environment so we both can be successful. That's one of the ways I define antecedent arrangement.
No, and that's
how
great.
I
And
use my tools, how I like nail trimmings, where I'm setting my equipment, whether it's on before they get there or not. All of that thinking beforehand about how the bird may react, and let me set things up so he will have the best success.
So I honestly don't think when you go to dental school, they never teach the dentist antecedent arrangement. Because
No.
think about it. So, when you go to the dentist and they put you in the chair and you look to the side and there's the tray with all the tools of destruction and torture. And
Right.
now as the animal, I start the anxiety goes up and the stress, and I'm thinking that I might just want to get out of the chair because I really don't like what's coming next. And
Our
we don't
escape
always think
avoidance behavior is higher.
exactly. It's so true, and the other thing about antecedent arrangement is we being aware of hazards. So it's summertime. We've got fans on. We've got, open doors and windows and what have you. We've got ceiling fans. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've had people who are just starting recall and the birds either, unfortunately fly into that ceiling fan and hopefully don't fly too hard, but or they get up on the ceiling fan and they're like, yeah, no, not coming down, it's not happening. So it's not only, I think it's antecedent arrangement. You hit the nail on the head when you said both of you for success, that the animal needs to be set up to succeed, but so do you as the trainer. It's, if I am going to train a bird that's fully flighted, I'm gonna try not to have really high things that I can't get to if that bird decides to park themselves there. Obviously, when you start flying, free flying, that's a different story. But if I'm gonna do flight indoors, I'm gonna try not to have the big tall piece of furniture that I have to get a step ladder if I want to get up there and get the bird down. You want to be aware of, other people in the environment, other animals in the environment. And people immediately jump to, oh, a dog or a cat or, another a predator. Sometimes it's just the flock. Pie and your macaw and your other birds have an amazing relationship. But if you were going to bring a new bird in, how would you set that up so that there was success? Would you work alone with like one-on-one with the bird, or would you do it in more of a flock setting?
I would do one-on-one with the bird.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the reason that I believe it works so well with me is I want the bird to learn to look to me for information. I want the bird to trust that the information that I give him is real, I'm not fooling him, and that he's heavily reinforced for it. So when I do put him in a flock environment, he's got plenty of behavior history of trust and respect with me. And I have a higher chance of communicating with him successfully by doing that first step.
Yeah. And I think you touched on something really important when you said that they're reinforced for what they do. A mistake that I've seen happen time and time again with novice trainers is, you hold up the big handful of the favorite food, right? That whatever that favorite reinforcer is, and you hold up that handful, and the bird's like, "Yes, that's what I want. I'm down. Here I am. I'm happy to recall to you, and here I am. I'm on your hand." And they get the big reinforcer, and you say, "Oh, that worked." And then the next time, you show that, but it may not be what you actually provide. It's that bait and switch.
Right.
People make that mistake all the time, and then the bird's like, "Oh, the brakes come on because I I've been trained to expect one thing, and I'm getting shortchanged."
Well, let me clarify that a little bit. Because we've lied to them by showing them that we'll give you this $100 bill if you do this amount of work, and then we only give them a $5 bill. But if we do not show them the reinforcer, and we ask for the behavior, then we do have the ability to vary the reinforcer and vary its value
Yes.
so that it doesn't become predictable or a habit. They always know, or they're not going to come down this. I always know he's got a peanut. I'm not coming down this time. But you
Right.
present that little bit of predictability that they know it's going to be varied.
Yes. Yeah. No, that's absolutely true. As long as you're not showing it and then giving something different, they do need
Right.
to learn that I'll get something, but it may not be the end all be all reinforcer for me, but I'll get something. So, a varied reinforcement is a good thing because then that they'll work for whatever, not just like you said, I'll only work for walnut or macadamia nut, whatever.
I understand this is almost like the gambling effect that has on humans. Sometimes we pull that slot and we get a whole bunch and we get what we want, and sometimes we pull the slot and we just get a few. But guess what?
Yeah,
We keep pulling on that slot in hopes of getting the big one, right? So that's
very
what
true.
I think about when I try to use that type of reinforcement.
I think that's so true. So we've touched a little bit on indoor recall, outdoor recall. Um, so it's a personal preference whether you're going to free fly your birds or not, and it's a lifestyle. Am I right?
Yeah, oh yes, it's you don't want to train an athlete to perform on the field and then bench them all season, right? I mean, it's so if you build and create an athlete, you want to keep them exercise, you want to keep them happy. You don't introduce them to this wonderful lifestyle and then say, no, you can't have any more for a while because of whatever, because I'm busy.
Yeah. Um, and
It's a
so
beautiful
you
Amazon named
so
Rex, owned by Courtney Jones. Been an awesome student.
nice.
Rex is one of our most favorite flyers.
Oh, that's cool. So you don't use a harness, right, Chris?
I don't like using a harness for training purposes. Now, will I use a harness for safety purposes during some conditions? Yes, I will. Like if I go to an
Mhm.
AFA conference and I'm in the hotel, everybody feels a little more secure. The bird's on. Percy's in the harness, not flying down the hall, scaring everybody. But as for training, I I have used a flight line before
Mhm.
to evaluate a bird's behavior or decisions when we
Yeah.
first go outside. But as a normal rule, I think it's more of a hindrance, and
Mhm.
um, it's a little intrusive to their learning.
Right. And I think
I want them to kind of make mistakes so they can learn from them.
yeah. I think too, using a creance or a guideline, can be a false sense of security as a trainer, because you're like, "Oh, yeah, he's got flying down, he's great, he'll do an A to B," and then it's because they were on a creance, and I know, I'm not sure if she's still out there. Anita Wolf is out there, listening, and, I like if Anita wants to weigh in the comments, I think that would be great. Whether, starting out, like, doing creance flying and then transitioning to free flying, that's a whole nother night's discussion, though. Um, on
But let
recall,
me add something, Robin. Can I? Yeah. Um,
yes.
a, a time when I like to use that flight line or creance line is I don't normally train in a level one environment. I'll train right amongst trees and the environment that the animal needs to perform in. And I'll use a ladder beginning, and I'll take the bird and start placing on branches in the tree while he's on little
Mhm,
leash and creance so he can learn those descent skills, so he can get behavior history of flying down from the tree, even from the lowest branches to start with. And once
mhm.
his confidence is built and my confidence is built in his skills, that line comes off.
Nice. Yep. No, and I agree with you as far as that's concerned. I was thinking more along the lines of, um, going straight from I had him on a creance, and then I just, let him do his own thing. So I wouldn't be comfortable with that, but I see what you're saying and how that could be very useful. So what about so we'll get to I want to talk some more about that you just talked about, but I want to ask you a couple questions.
Sure.
Recall. You've trained a recall. You've got, a bird that you're very comfortable with. You've trained a recall. You would call it solid. Um, is it foolproof?
I don't think anything's foolproof. Um,
Yeah.
our environment does a lot to influence our behavior, and you can make a behavior that you feel is bulletproof in your home or in one environment, only to have it fall apart in a similar and but dissimilar environment. So it helps to kind of generalize that behavior when you're training it in multiple environments to give you more success.
Mhm.
When you get into that brand new outdoor environment, that the bird doesn't freeze up and go, "Oh my gosh, this isn't like the living room we practiced in."
Right. Right. And I think generalizing those skills is so important because you never know. It may be it's if they're used to being in the house and they get out the door or out the window, now it's a completely different environment. It's the same skill set, but it's a completely different environment and with different factors that are, all of them are become a part of that behavior. If the wind changes, there's a predator down the road, I remember working with one zoo and it wasn't birds, it was livestock. And they had a great return to the barn trained. They could just, they gave a cue, they came off exhibit right into the barn. It was great to put them up at night. And they all of a sudden stopped doing it. And the trainers were baffled. They couldn't figure out why. And I was there doing look at your goats. I was there doing some consulting, and I was just walking the exhibit and the area, and I happened to look, and there was a kite that a child had lost that was up in the tree. Wasn't hanging down on their way. It wasn't, flapping in the breeze. It's just there, and the tail was hanging down. But now this was something completely foreign in an environment that they were in every single day. They did this behavior every single day. And suddenly, this kite, which sounds fairly innocuous, but there was this kite that was terrifying. And that's why they weren't transitioning in. Take the kite down, boom, behavior comes back. Um, so I think it's that knowing that although it's an amazing behavior, you've worked really hard training, there's always that chance that you're not going to get the exact behavior that you're looking for. I love this picture so much. So I got another question for you. We talked about relationships. We talked about building a relationship. Um, so do they come back to you because they love you?
Yes.
Really? That is not the answer I
Yes.
anticipated. Okay. All right. That's fair then. I mean, you have a
Yeah.
different set of experiences.
Yeah. They don't want to leave.
Okay.
Even I just had 3 of them get out the other day, and they didn't want to go anywhere. They just got out and they flew around a little bit, and they landed in the tree up here. I had a sun
Okay.
conure, a brand new sun conure. I only had it for a couple weeks. Never, ever, ever been outside. It got out by accident with my wife, and I'm like, our chances of getting that bird back are really slim. But we worked
Mhm.
for 2 days with it, and I built a relationship daily with it, under it, talking to it, providing reinforcement. Well, finally, when I went up on the roof, I got it to fly down to my shoulder, and I got a little toehold on that little guy, and he bit me all the way down, but he did bite me hard. He loved he and we and now she won't leave me alone. She's all over me. She loves me to death. But even birds
All
that
right.
again, it was that bird had no training I got that bird back because of relationship. That's all it
Okay.
was.
That's fair. I mean, that's a fair answer. My concern is when people tell me, like, there's no recall train, um, there's no history of reinforcement or anything like that, and people tell me, "Well, he loves me, that's why he won't fly away." If I have him out, I can take him out without any equipment, and he won't fly away because he loves me. When
And
it's
they've been doing it
concerning
for
to me.
years. Yeah.
Yeah,
And it
yeah.
works until it doesn't. It
Right.
works until that bird flies off. And I've gotten that
Right.
call more than a
Mhm.
dozen times. I've walked out
Yeah.
to the garden with my bird for years and he's never flown off. And this time, the hawk flew too close and he took off. And or there was a loud truck, whatever it is, some environmental
Mhm.
influence, some environmental event happened, and we can't
Right.
control those. Often we can create
Yeah.
them ourselves to help, but yeah, something happens and they fly off. So they having that love and respect, it's hopefully if they fly off, they didn't fly far and that they want to come back to you.
Right.
Right? But if they take off and they want to leave, like this little conure, I kind of thought, wow, he's just gone. But he didn't want to leave. We gave him lots of
Mhm.
food, lots of freedom, lots of choice and control, which I
That's yeah.
I find is so important for their happiness in their world. And
Absolutely.
I worked with a bird today that has lots of learned helplessness. It's just sat in the cage and it's just pretty compliant to just about anything you want to do. And
Mhm.
it's a wonderful bird, beautiful bird. But we're working with her and she's making great progress.
Yeah, and I think that choice piece, Chris, is very important as well. They have a choice when you're working on recall. You're working on whether it's outdoor or indoor. You're asking them to come into your space or into, maybe it's a recall to a perch. You're asking them to come someplace that they're not, it's not their cage, it's not, whatever that may be. You're asking, for that, but it's also a matter of offering that choice. um, and they don't have to do it. If you're working with animals, any kind of animal, it doesn't have to be just birds. You're working with any kind of animal, you really have to offer those choices, and you need to make it worth their while. Okay, well, why does that bird want to come to you? Why does that bird want to come to a perch? And you need to think about that choice, and it can't be your way or the highway. You're going to do
Right.
this
That's
now
not the
because I
choice.
want you
That's
to.
not a choice. That's an ultimatum.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I think sometimes we get caught up in the verbiage. Well, I offered, you can come now or not at all. That's not a choice. You can come now and, you get this now, but if you don't come now, you're not going to get it. Okay. So there's a difference between the window of opportunity closes for right now versus
Right.
you lost it, you blew it, you're done. You know? So how do you handle something like that? I mean, you ask for a recall. You've trained it, and we're going to go through just the steps of a recall in a minute. But you've trained this recall. You're feeling like it's pretty solid, and a bird completely refuses to do that. How do you handle that, Chris?
Well, I I have learned that I to fly these guys outside successfully, I need to have more tools in the toolbox than just the hammer. I can't use the hammer for everything. I don't know. I like using that analogy. No, if I like back to relationship part. I play games with my birds. The target training, clicker training, is a game. I often employ little stuffed animals, little objects that we play with. Now,
Mm-hmm.
when a bird doesn't want to recall down from the tree to me and do the behavior I'm asking, I'll lessen the criteria. I'll ask for a spin. Will you give me that much? Well, if I can get the bird engaged in a couple simple behaviors, it raises the probability that he's going to. We're gaining momentum with this, and it increases the probability of him coming when I do the recall next. But if
Yeah.
he's blowing that off, I'll reach into my little bag of toys and I'll go, hey, here's your little stuffed squeaker animal that we play with all the time. And I'll sit down in the chair and I'll squeak it a couple times. And guess who wants to come play? Because I'm playing with his toy. Oh my gosh, you know how a kid is when you play with their toy. They all of a sudden, you got my toy. Let me come. Um, Again, the target stick. I was blown away the first time my bird wouldn't come to me during a recall, and my mentor says, "You got your target stick?" And I says, "That's for in the house. That's birds up in the tree." They said, "No, get your target stick out and hold it down."
Yeah.
And Delilah just came right down. I'm going, "What happened? What was that?" And I said, "We kind of like did a little mental reset. She dropped, whatever her wheels were turning in her mind, and she saw, oh, I know that game, and I get heavily reinforced for that game. I'm going to come down and play that game."
Right.
So, by having additional tools in your toolbox, and be it food reinforcers, be it toys, be it, I carry a little harmonica around with me, and I've learned to kind of toot on the harmonica a little bit, and and every bird's different, and we all feel different on different days, but I feel I have a good little bag of tricks to reach into to try things, and usually something works. And when it doesn't, when nothing works, I wait for Mother Nature. Mother Nature always seems to come to help me out.
Mm-hmm. It's
They will need to come down for food and water.
mm-hmm.
They will need to come down for socialization. I've had many birds like their glorious night out overnight and then immediately want to come back the next morning. It's like, yeah, that was fun, but I don't want to do that again.
It's like when we all
So,
we
and
all
then
tried to
they
run away.
learn.
Yeah.
Yeah, they learn
It's
from
like
their
when we all tried to
mistakes.
run away.
Right.
Absolutely. And you're
Right.
getting some amazing comments here, Chris. Sabine says that she loves that it's training and relationship and that training, she says training builds the relationship along the way, which it definitely does. And Lisa says she offers games the same way you do and that you taught her well and it works beautifully. And Courtney says she's out right now flying 2 of your babies and she says, love you.
Yay.
Um, and Lisa, that's a great point. We have days when we are less motivated. So why not expect the same from birds? And I think that's so important, and when you were talking about changing up your criteria a little bit, and when everybody watches, the big bird shows and they think, okay, it's this is going to happen. And then next, this is going to, oh, no, no, no. As a trainer, you've got to be willing to adapt. You've got to be, okay, well and you watch and you observe and you say, okay, that's not working today. And with recall, it's the same thing. Okay, he's not coming, to me. And it doesn't even have to be outside. It's when you're doing recall in the house, when you're doing recall, in a facility. Okay, that's not working today. Let's try something else. I'm going to take, a couple breaths and then I'm going to offer something else and see if that works. Or I'm going to request when you said, I love, asking for a spin, asking for something a little bit different. And then you come back to, okay, that was great. Good job. You want to come down, or you want to come here. And when you mix it up like that, you can sometimes break up a chain that's not working. And I
Right.
think that's a great strategy. Crystal says that you are the best mentor and she's honored to have had the opportunity to train
boy.
under you. So
Oh, I have some
lots
great
of beautiful.
students.
You do. This is great. I'm coming down there.
Come on.
But
And everybody's got birds in the air.
Good boy.
You're such a good
Nice.
boy. I love you. Yes, I
Um,
do.
so couple of things I want to talk about. Not only for outdoor flying, but for indoor recall, indoor flight. There are some physical conditions that you need to think about. How do you assess feather? Like if you're the feather condition of a bird, I've had people say, well, I got this bird in, he came from a rescue or he came from a really bad situation and I got him and he wouldn't fly from his cage to his play stand. And sometimes it's just a matter of poor feather condition. Do you check your guys before they go out, Chris, or how do you work? How do you do that?
I do. I can cue a wing lift and just get a good look, see if make sure there's nothing going on. In the past, some of these birds, before I had them, some of them have had a history of chewing their mates' wings off
Mhm.
during season. So anyway, I'm just real careful about watching their feather condition, especially the flyers when they go out there. If they're going to be out there competing in the big game, I want them to be in good condition. I don't want to send them out, you know, not 100% because they're going to be going up against that hawk. That's a
Yeah.
professional and it's at 100%.
It's true. So Kathy Kazin, Kathy, do you have my outline there? Because she said feather condition and muscle condition, which is so important, because that muscle condition, you can't expect a bird that's been a perch potato for most of its life to suddenly even fly, from the top of the cage to the play stand. That's more like controlled
Right.
fall. It's what is it? What does Buzz Lightyear say? It's falling with style. That's exactly what that is. And so you want to talk about the muscle condition as well and make sure that they're physically okay to perform the behaviors that you're asking for.
Absolutely.
So Sabine
Yeah. A
has a
simple
question. She says,
test.
go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say a simple test that I do during evaluating, besides feeling the keel and getting an idea, getting a keel score on them, which is their muscles. I'll hold them up and I'll do a gentle drop so I can
Mhm.
feel the strength in their wings, to feel if they can hold their weight. I'm not going to slam them down and make them flat, but if you do it gentle enough and you can feel what kind of strength they have, and that kind of gives you a gauge whether I'm not going to try this 5 foot perch across right here. Maybe 1 foot. Let's get a hop. Let's just
Yeah.
get the fan blowing on him and maybe get him his wings up and maybe get him flapping his wings in the fan. Get him a little exercise first. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, we started that with Percy when he was a 10-year-old rescue. He dropped like a rock, and we had to slowly work with building his muscles back up.
Yeah, and again, that's more of that game playing, the wings up and and you can turn it into, it's simple and it's easy to reinforce, and you get them to do that wings up, and then you can just assess from there. Or working with desensitizing to touch. Not that we want to do the big stroking thing or any of that, but if you need to assess the physical condition of your bird, you turn it into a game that becomes reinforced. And so, yeah, no, all those things.
I had to take a baby to the vet about 2 weeks ago, one of the young babies, because the uropyle gland on the tail was swollen and inflamed. And
Mhm.
unless we're doing a physical tactile check on our baby, we miss those things. We don't see those things and get
Mhm.
them help in time before it turns out to something serious.
Right. So we've got some questions. Sabine says, how do you feel about extra small birds flying outside? I know Briar, but Briar's a little bit bigger than my smallest 50-gram green cheek. Additionally, how do you feel like easily spooked birds are able to get to a place where one day flight may be possible? Or are some birds just not good candidates?
Great questions. Great questions. Yes, it is true that I believe that not every bird is a good candidate for free flights. Every baby has the best opportunity, but life changes us.
Mhm.
Let me see if I can see her question. Flying little birds outside. You know, I love going out and watching I'm watching the playing field before I let my team out. And some of the things that I look for are some of the little birds out there playing in the yard, some of the little, and I always look at those guys, they're not caught by a hawk, but they don't show any fear. And then when we do see the hawks come in, often we don't even see those little birds budge. They can see and tell when the hawks are in hunting mode and something that I learned from Hafet and Puerto Rican parrots, how they train their Amazons to be successful when they re-release them, is stamina. I mean, the way to a hawk has been known to give up chase. The longest recorded thing I think was 90 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
With most of them giving up after 20, 30 seconds. And that's what we normally see in free flight. Oh, we got a hawk chase. Oh, it's over. It's normally over. And it's true because they can catch. There's much easier game for them to catch. So by teaching these birds like Hafet did, his Amazons, keeping them in the air in the aviary for like 3 minutes, stirring them up and gave them the stamina to be twice as long as any hawk chase. And his success rate went way up. So I make sure I do that with I fly my little conures. I think my lightest conure is about 95 grams. But I fly them. We have 4 of them that we fly. And they're just nice and strong. They're strong enough to outfly, to last the length of time where the hawk will give up and decide to chase something much easier to catch because he does not want to work that hard.
Right. And that's where you work on that stamina. If you're not free flying your birds, you work on it in the house. You work on it, maybe they fly so many circuits around the house. Working with raptors, that stamina is really important if you're working with a flighted raptor, or you're trying to, in rehab situations, there's a place called Avian Haven up here in Maine. They've been in the forefront of raptor rehabilitation for many, many years. And they had their mews opened up to a circular flight with walls that came up. And so if a bird's flying along being successful, they've got to figure out how to maneuver and get some more lift and get over this little, wall barrier. And then they go on a little further. And it's to build that stamina, to build the flight ability. And when you're working with a bird in the house, Daniela asked about, for older birds, shouldn't you train them to land successfully? For any bird, you want to have them land. It's a good question, Daniela. You want them to learn how to land successfully. And she said, and if so, how? One of the things I would suggest is, do very controlled flight and very short flight to start with. And so that way, they go this, not real far. And then they have a very comfortable place to land on, something that is size appropriate. But that, it's again, antecedent arrangement. You want to set them up to succeed. So Daniela, you want to make sure you pick that landing space where they're going to be able to do that. Chris, do you have any suggestions about working with birds and teaching them how to land?
Yes. I think about it as teaching someone how to use the car brakes for the first time. Okay. I mean, you don't want to take them up to 60 miles an hour and give them a big field. Let's just see if we can move about 5 feet, and let's see if you can put on the brakes without putting me through the windshield. Okay, without slamming on. So by teaching that person the slow, proper application to stop, we can learn it, but if done in small approximations like that, small, and we should do that with our birds. Give them something slow and achieve, not something where they'll be going so fast that when they have to stop and land, that in some way it's punishing for them, and then that diminishes their desire to do the behavior.
Right. And I think, another thing that if I know that you've been to Natural Encounters to the ranch, and that was the first place where I encountered this setting, perches on swivels and perches with give, so that, because when you've got a bird that's just learning to fly, just doing recall, coming from, or you're sending a bird or you're recalling him from one part of the aviary to another, and they're going to land on a perch that's super solid, that is going to be, Daniela, when you talk about safely landing and landing successfully, that super hard landing is not going to be a positive experience. So offering a landing spot that has some give to it, that has a little bit of movement, because when you look at, when our birds and just birds in general are out in the wild, they're not landing on bricks. Well, some of those falcons are, but they're not landing on bricks. They're landing on things that have some give. What do you think, Chris?
I Let me share with you some observation of the babies fledging. During their fledging process, the first day or two, they hit some solid objects. Let me tell you. But I made it as as non-punishing as I could, with pillows on the floor and curtains and blankets up over the windows. But after their unsuccessful attempts, I've witnessed such beautiful slowing down, stopping, and hovering behavior, and lightly setting themselves down on the perch. And that is just so beautiful, them being in that kind of control. But I did use things like a swinging perch that gave them the cushion, so when they land, it wasn't so harsh and punishing.
Right.
But some of their environment was. So they had the choice to experiment. And we got this, and then babies are just going to experiment. That's the wonderful thing about babies. But to see how fast they learn, and as an adult, if I had crashed on my skateboard a couple of times, I think I would give up. But a young kid, they'll get right back on and keep trying until they're successful. So,
yeah,
but anyway,
absolutely.
yes, I totally agree. Set up your environment so that it's as easy for them to do the behavior you want to.
Mm-hmm. And I think too, you've got, when you're training recall indoors. I know some of you are friends with Melissa Davis. Melissa's out on the West Coast, and she has Zorro the Kaik, and Melissa does some fantastic training with Zorro. And I couldn't find it, Melissa. She told me I could use some of her videos, and I couldn't find them. But she is very clear with Zorro. You've got to be clear what you're asking for as far as that recall is concerned. And you've got to be sure. So when you're working on recall in the house, or in a building, or in, wherever indoors, you want to make sure that what you're asking for is very clear, that it's not, I'm asking you to fly from where you are to the other end of the room and over to the side and then over here. Eventually, maybe that's what we want you to do. But what I'm asking you for is to fly to me, or to fly to a perch. And so you want to be careful not to, unless you're trying to encourage flight all over your house, you want to be careful that you're reinforcing the behavior that you really are asking for. And it's the same with any training. You got to make sure that you're not inadvertently reinforcing things you don't want. But with a recall, I think it's, make sure your cue is very clear. And I think using a target stick, like you said, Chris, if I was going to go outside and I had a bird that was recall trained and, happened to be outside, that target stick is a familiar. It's something that, okay, I get it. That's where I want to be. I've been there before. I've been to that target stick before, and it got me X, whatever that may be. So you using a target stick, if you've got a bird that's really good at target training and moving around with a target stick, continue that flow and use it for recall training. Small approximations, little small movement, and then it gets bigger and bigger. And I think of all the training, that I can think of, you start with that target, but recall is really the one that builds the most. It goes from, okay, I got a target, now it's bigger, it's bigger, it's bigger. And it's so easy to see the increments when you're doing recall training. What do you think, Chris?
I do. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's and it's so beneficial in so many ways. It's called recall, so it's come back, but it can also be I can recall you to your cage or to your play stand. I mean, we've got a lot of people struggle with, my bird won't go back in the cage at night, or won't go back in the aviary. And if you've worked on recall training, these very simple steps, you can use that to get a bird back in the cage. Have you ever struggled with that hurdle? I mean, most people have.
Oh, I have. I have a great example. My birds who were very fluent and good at going back in the cage suddenly stopped wanting to, and I didn't know. I couldn't figure it out. And so it so helps to have a mentor, someone to talk to, someone to work these things out with, and not go on Facebook with it. And my mentor told me, well, let's start the behavior. When was the last time you reinforced this behavior? And I went, oh, what are you kidding? I'm the king of reinforcement. Of course I'm reinforcing my birds. And they said, no, Chris, come on. Honestly, when was the last time you reinforced your bird for going in the cage? And I went, yeah, well, yeah, I really haven't. I kind of stopped doing that because she's been just doing it. I haven't had to reinforce it. And I remember this real clearly. And I tell my students, like the dentist tells you, only floss the teeth you want to keep, only reinforce the behaviors you want to keep. Okay, so if you stop reinforcing those behaviors, guess what's going to happen to them? Like your teeth, you stop flossing them, you're going to have problems with them later. I don't know. My little funny take on that.
It's so true. And we kind of get in this like, okay, I trained this, I'm going to move on to bigger and better. And then I'm going to move on to bigger and better. And it's going to be flashier and it's going to be a cooler behavior. And then, well, how come he's not doing what he used to do? Well, because why would he? He's not getting reinforced for it anymore. Maybe we can delude ourselves and say, oh, well, it was a fun behavior, so he'll go back and do it. Maybe. But what define that fun? Define what, okay, it was probably the almond that was there, when he went back in that cage, or whatever that high value reinforcer may be. That was probably what it was. And you're 100% right. Behavior goes away. Diane Hyde likes your analogy. She said it's a great analogy for training. And it's so, yeah, it is good. That's so true. But all right, well, the hour flew by, Chris. No pun intended.
It did. It's hard to believe it's over.
I know, right? But as far as recall, and a lot of our that are on tonight are flyers, but some of them are not. In general, recall with not necessarily outside, but just training recall. What would you say is your best advice for people regarding how to train a recall?
I like using using other animals as an example. Like if you had a dog or a young puppy that you had and you opened the door and he got out, wouldn't you want to be able to have a way to call him and have him run back in? I mean, you don't want to not do anything, and just when that door opens, you don't know what's going to happen. So we should do this with our companion parrots. They're worth it. They need us to show them that they can do that. They're all fully capable. Animals accidentally get outside. It happens. Sometimes I accidentally get outside my boundaries and I have to use my GPS to get back. But I don't know.
No,
I don't know where I was going with that.
I agree with you 100% that is, training a recall is perhaps one of the most important trainings you can do, because I don't think anybody says, "Oh, I don't really care if the door opens and he goes out." If it's a bird that's never outside, if it's that recall, and again, we talked about it's not foolproof, right? It's not 100%. It's never 100% because of environmental factors. But if you've got that recall that you have worked on and your bird has worked on in the house, in your home, in a facility, and they happen to get out, at least that's a tool that you have in your toolbox. That's something that, you've got that little bit of an extra edge over the person who's never trained any recall at all. So I urge people to work on this. If they've got questions, you can message me. I'm sure Chris is willing to chat with people in your spare time, right? Um, but reach out, and if you have questions, you can contact me through the Leather Elves. But we definitely, we need to get more people doing these things. And Kathy, that's a good point. Lara says every interaction with our pets is a training opportunity, and it's true. It's very true.
Yes, it is.
Well, thank you, Chris. It's always fun talking to you. I appreciate you spending that
It is.
with us. And
I'm glad I had some babies to show you guys this time. I do have several available. If anybody's interested, please contact me.
And it's interesting that Chris, I'm so sorry that I didn't say that. Chris is a phenomenal breeder. I'm lucky to know a couple of really responsible, ethical breeders. And Chris happens to be one of them. And I saw Terry Clark is on here. Terry works with her babies on recall. So if you guys if you're looking for birds, like Chris said, he has some birds available. You can reach him through Percy Wings. I don't know if Terry has any available. If you guys want to learn more about aviculture, this event that's happening is Aviculture United. It's AFA, ASA, and OPA all meeting together. It's going to be in Dallas in September. I would highly suggest, if you have the time, to go and do that. Lots of great speakers, lots of great networking. Chris, are you going?
I'm not sure. I've been also been asked to do a show at Seattle Parrot Expo, so I'm not. I'm weighing my options.
That's a lot of travel to do both. So I do understand. But yeah, so there's a lot coming up, a lot of great information. Just so you guys know, next week, I'm not doing a live stream next week. We're going to go to like every other, but on July 28th, so 2 weeks from tonight, Zeb Ernest from Blue Planet Pets will be joining me. Some of you probably know Zeb from, he's awesome. Know Zeb from online. He's just so real. And we're going to talk about, so I asked him, I said, what do you want to talk about? And he said, I don't know, living with parrots. And so my head immediately went to, we're going to talk about husbandry and like the day-to-day. And he's like, no, not the day-to-day, the journey. So that's what Zeb and I are going to talk about. As always, anybody that's listening, if you've got a topic that you would like to delve into, that you would like me to, talk to someone about or talk more about or do like a focus on, please reach out to me through the Leather Elves and let me know so we can come up with that for you and give you guys what you really want. So take care, everybody. Have a wonderful week. Check out the Leather Elves. Check out Percy Wings Aviary. And you take care, Chris, and I will see you soon.
Thank you, Robin. And thank you, Nick.
As always, thank you, Nick. Good night.
Good night.